Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we actually have a reporter who ripped into Justin Trudeau while he was in Port Colborne, making one of these announcements that he's been doing lately in regards to EV battery plants. Now, the question had nothing to do with EV batteries, but everything to do with how poor Justin Trudeau is doing and how hated he is. And you could tell he really did not like this question.
Hi, Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, I want to ask you about leadership. Polls have put you 20 points behind the Conservatives, and it doesn't seem to be getting better despite your recent communications push from your budget. The public appears to have an overwhelmingly negative view of you personally, and you seem to have lost control of the conversation on some of the key issues that Canadians care about. I think the public might be looking at you and your position right now and thinking, for the good of the Liberal Party, why is he staying on?
Thank you for your concern, Laura. I know there are lots of folks in Ottawa thinking about process. I'm focused on results for Canadians. I'm focused on delivering the kinds of things that are going to set Canada and Canadians up for success over the coming decades, because that's the moment we're in right now.
Justin really trying out there to lighten the mood, but that answer was hot garbage, and at this point, nobody believes him. Yes, we are in a situation, but it's because of you guys that we're in this situation. And the reporter who actually posed this question, Laura Stone, who's part of the Globe and Mail, went on the CTV Power Play panel, and it was a little interesting because they had a former Liberal, Conservative, and NDP party member in there. And just take a look at each one of their views on this.
All right, so he's not focused on the polls, he's focused on helping Canadians. Now, we've heard that one before, and really facing a 20-point gap, that may be the only answer he could give. So is this proof that the federal budget just didn't help, or are the Liberals beyond help at this point? Let's bring back the front bench panel. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Laura Stone. Laura, thank you so much for your concern. I think we all appreciate your concern on this panel. Wonderful question, by the way. And I think is interesting on how Canadians might be thinking that he's staying on as leader there. And he kind of smirked and, said that thank you for your concern. But really is a moment of levity. But also it feels like his team doesn't really have an answer to why they're not getting that post-budget bump.
It was a good rebuttal, I must say. In the room, everyone laughed. But look, I think that, we've seen these numbers now kind of dig in for months. And we've heard talk in Liberal circles and insiders that they were hoping to see at least a small bump post-budget, and they had that kind of 2-week communications tour across the country to promote some of their affordability and housing measures. That doesn't appear to have turned the tide on the poll numbers, but they do still have time. And I think kind of the big question is, are Canadians gravitating towards Pierre Poilievre because they like him, or is it more of a repudiation of Justin Trudeau and being tired of him? And do the Liberals maybe see opportunity in that they're still able to go out and define Pierre Poilievre or talk about him in a way that makes people more skeptical of him as a leader? But I think right now, Justin Trudeau talking about not himself is probably the best strategy that the Liberals have.
Yeah, Brian, a lot to unpack here. First, though, as the polls keep showing this gap, there's still more questions behind closed doors and getting louder about Justin Trudeau's future, are there not?
Yeah, I'm sure, and not even just behind closed doors. People news publicly as well, and that's normal whenever a government's been in power for a while. So look, I think the numbers and the polls are certainly something any political person sees, but I do want to give context. I mean, we always talk about political angles and calculations. I mean, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is in a position to still make a big difference for the next few months, even if there is going to be end up being have a change of government, change of leadership, whatever it is. So the line of I'm focused on delivering results is yes, a political one, sure, but it also has some truth to it. I mean, you're still trying to focus with the time you have making a difference for the country. And I have no doubt that that's the case. That said, if I were them, I would certainly be looking at the numbers and also looking a little bit underneath the hood of those numbers. What I'd be curious is, I think Laura's absolutely right to say, by the way, whoever cut that question and all that and added it to our panel with Laura on it, brilliant. But I think Laura's right to, yeah. So I really do think Laura makes a good point where when we see that the Liberal Party is sort of not moving the numbers even after the numbers aren't moving even after the budget and the big push, that's a bit of a concern. So I do think they would have liked to at least see some momentum. But under the hood, one thing I'd be curious, is there at least a little more openness to listening? I think if they could have at least accomplished that, because I think a lot of people felt that Canadians were just tuning out the Prime Minister to some extent, if not totally. And that's a really difficult place to be, because it doesn't matter what you say, if they're not listening, you're not going to be able to sort of get anything to resonate with them. You're not going to be able to sort of get things on any type of track again. So I think if there is a bit of indication that people are sort of open to listening to him, because I do think the budget had measures that were supported, then that would be, I think, seen as a little win for the Liberals.
Yeah, shout out to Sam Pope and Rachel Swatek for getting those clips cut there, Brian. Lisa, on Brian's point, are people still willing to listen? Because they presented their budget, but it seems it may be just fatigue with the messenger.
Well, I don't know what it is, but I'd be worried if I were a Liberal, because people are concerned about their personal finances and they're concerned about crime. So the theory is, let's have a big budget blowout. Let's send money to everybody we possibly can. Let's tell them we're going to solve all of their problems. And surely that's going to work. It didn't work. And the polling is showing that. So now they have to figure out, well, what the heck are we going to do? I mean, obviously, people are going to say, let's change up horses. Maybe it is all about the Prime Minister. But is it just so broken now for the Liberal government that nothing is going to help them? Because people are just so concerned about things that can't be solved by a government making big promises that they really don't have an ability to deliver on in the short term.
Now, I quickly want to jump in here and give my 2 cents on what was just said. And to me, it seems like Brian gets it, but he still has his liberal rose-colored glasses on and still thinks that Canadians want to listen to Trudeau. It doesn't matter what this guy says at this point. There's no amount of openness that he can give us, because he's had 8-9 years to produce something and he hasn't produced nothing. And now at the 11th hour, as the election is coming up, now he's starting to accelerate all these announcements and everything, like Lisa was stating. It's a little too little too late. And as they were talking about with the polls right now, the Conservatives, yes, they have a 20-point lead, and if the election was held, that they would have a majority in the House. Now, to what Lisa stated, yeah, it seems like it's all about Trudeau and his ego, because even at this point, if they did switch to any other member of the Liberal government, nobody would care. Freeland is a no-go. Dominic LeBlanc is a no-go. Mark Holland is a no-go. There's just scandal after scandal. Anita Anand is a no-go. Like, nobody in the Liberal government would be a suitable replacement that anybody would start to just be like, hey, you know what? The Liberals are looking good now. Let's definitely go with them. Because it's just too much scandals, too much incompetence. It just doesn't make sense. So Trudeau will most likely just ride this ship to the ground. But as we're going to move into Tom Mulcair, I actually think that his perspective is pretty good.
Now, Tom, Trudeau keeps pushing back against the proverbial walk in the snow with the weather changing. I think maybe he'll be paddling up a river, but are they
He's
up
up
a
a
creek
river
without a paddle at this point?
Yeah, he's up a river.
Yeah, I think you ended that one right. And to go to your previous two questions, I think that the problem is that Canadians are actually listening to what Trudeau says. And essentially what he promised in that clip and what he's been promising for months and months is, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's just that amazing. And what he doesn't realize is that, yes, he can define Pierre Poilievre very negatively to progressive voters, to his Liberal NDP base. But there are so many people across the country who are saying, hey, what you're doing doesn't work. You better try something else. And, you know, my politics couldn't be further from that of Poilievre, but I have to pull back and just look as an observer at how this is working and what's not working for Trudeau. And what's not working for Trudeau is to promise to continue being Trudeau. And that's what Canadians have walked away from. Lisa's completely right, by the way. This whole budget show, this dance of the seven veils, announcements across the country was supposed to be all sorts of sizzle, and they're still 20 points behind. I think that the only option, obviously, is for them to say, well, we do need some time if we're going to be able to have a chance in the next election. Give us some time to have a leadership race and try to create a little bit of interest around that. But to your direct point, Trudeau ain't listening. You know, from the sources that I've been able to talk to, both senior advisors who have tried to talk with Trudeau and including one MP, it's just like, nope, the conversation's not going to take place. Now, maybe he doesn't have any choice but to say that, because the minute he opens a crack in that door, then it's the floodgates that will open. But at the same time, he's got to realize that if he does think about the future of his own party, that maybe that has to include some reflection on whether or not he's the person who can possibly lead them into the next election, or whether it'll turn into a Michael Ignatieff, 30, 40 seat disaster.
I think Tom said it perfectly. Trudeau continuing to promise being Trudeau is hurting him. But it's no surprise because we all know the guy's an egomaniac, so what else do we really expect? And as Tom is stating, he has senior advisors and MPs reaching out to him to try to talk to him, and it just sounds like he's just ignoring them all. Now, maybe he has a point that if he does open up that door to this conversation, it could bite him in the ass. I'd say you kind of saw that when he made the exemption to the carbon tax for the Atlantic provinces. That became a whole shitstorm for him. But I wanted to continue with the interview, the panel. And if you listen to Laura and then Brian, what Brian says at the end there actually is something worth looking into, in my opinion.
Yeah, or Laura, conversely, does he decide he'll be the one to drive them into the ditch, and then let the next leader be sort of clean of that and have a clean break on the other side?
Well, I mean, that's sort of what I was trying to get at with my question, because he has been asked so many times about his leadership numbers and polling. I was sort of trying to frame it as, what kind of Liberal Party do you want to lead? Because at some point, Justin Trudeau will not be the leader of the Liberal Party. Everyone moves on at some point. I think, by all accounts, from insiders and others, he wants to lead the Liberals into the next election and take on Pierre Poilievre. And everyone in Liberal circles talks about his proficiency as a campaigner, and he likes to be kind of the underdog in that setting. But at some point, you do have to think about what state you're leaving the party in for the next person. And so maybe he's doing more thinking about that. His answer today really didn't seem to suggest that he was, and he seems pretty dug in on his path to lead the party into the next campaign.
Brian, I'll give you the last word, especially what Laura just said on how he wants to leave the party, because eventually he'll have to.
Yeah, I mean, two quick things. So first off, yes, there's no question that that's something that should be considered, and I'm sure it is. But also, when you have the chance to govern, certainly the way in which you leave the country, in my case is the province, is certainly top of mind, right? You obviously have a responsibility to the political party that you're a part of, but your ultimate responsibility in that case, in that situation, is certainly to all the people that you represent. And the only other thing I'd say, I mean, look, because I'm sure people listening will be like, well, why in the world is he not doing something? You got to be fair. One calculation, though, and Laura hinted to this in her first remark, is, look, people are, yes, a bit irritated, maybe very irritated, or somewhere in the middle with the Trudeau government. But at one point, when it comes to an election, they actually have to choose somebody else. Right now, they're sort of saying, we're upset with you, no question about that, and that explains the 20-point lead. But when it comes to the election, they actually have to put an X. And some people will say, well, do I really want the Conservatives? Do I really want Poilievre? And I think that's a calculation for Trudeau and probably his team, that they still think with that dynamic, they may still have a shot at this.
And to be fair, I think Brian has a very valid point there. Even though currently the Conservatives are up 20 points in the polls, nobody likes any of the party leaders, especially the Liberals for sure, but the NDP and the Conservatives both view Pierre and Jagmeet in the negatives, as you see from this latest polls.
Justin Trudeau, or I say Pierre Poilievre, or Jagmeet Singh, what goes through your mind? Well, we got a survey from the folks at Angus Reid. Shows a lot of Canadians not so impressed with our political leaders. In fact, the numbers here are worse than we have seen in 50 years. Angus Reid, looking at the leaders of the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP, and their negative ratings. Pierre Poilievre sits at a minus 12% negative rating. Jagmeet Singh scoring a minus 14. And look at Justin Trudeau, the most unpopular by far, -38.
Now, to me, this isn't evidence enough that the Conservatives won't win the next election, but it was surprising to see that the Conservatives are up 20 points and Pierre is down in the negatives in terms of popularity. Now, who knows as we get closer to the election if his popularity will go down or up? Only time will tell. But it does beg the question that Brian was putting forward. Are people only voting for the Conservatives because they're tired of Justin, or do they actually believe in what Pierre is saying? Again, we haven't heard anything really concrete from Pierre in terms of his plans for what he would do when he's in office. I assume he's waiting for that to be delivered when he gets closer to the election time, or hopefully sometime soon. But as always, this is just my opinion. Love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about this. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.